Hey, my name is Gerald Hicks with X9 Scouting. I'm here with Zach Williams, Coach Zach Williams. We're here to discuss the transfer portal, the recruiting process, the coronavirus pandemic that our student athlete has faced this year. So, we have a small series together to discuss how our student athletes could better prepare themselves to either commit or try their different options to play at the collegiate level. So what we're going to do today is ask Coach Zach, just have him give us his story of the recruiting process. Because not everyone get a big one offer. Sometimes you have to go to JUCO. Sometimes you have to go to a community college. Sometimes you have to wait a year. So let's get this started. Coach, how you doing today?
How you doing, man? Appreciate you having me on. Like I said, my name is Zach Williams. I'm currently D-line coach here at Hueytown High School. I'm located in Hueytown, Alabama, with 6A school. Just a little bit about me. Born and raised, actually born in Birmingham, but raised in Mississippi, so I'm a Mississippi boy. Went to high school there, played 4 years of varsity football. And kind of the story of this series is the recruiting process. So I can kind of go ahead and give you my rundown from, I had to go through the recruiting process twice, actually. Played 4 years of varsity football. Went to a 2A school, which in Mississippi the highest classification is 6A. With it being 6A, a 2A school, man, we probably had 250 people in the school total. So not a lot of people on the football team. We might have had 30 on a good year. My senior year, I think we might have had like 32 people on the team. So coming from where I come from, a little small country town, community really, nobody goes to college, nobody gets scholarships, but I was just a kid that kind of just bet on himself. I tell this story. I did an interview not too long ago, and kind of was the first time I kind of told my real story, of how my recruiting process went, how everything went down. Because if you're on the outside looking in, if you really don't know me, if you know me from social media or from playing with me, you're like, hey, Zach, this great player, this and that. But it was a lot of bumps in that road to get to where I'm at now, but I'm thankful for those bumps. So back on my story, what I was saying, played 4 years of varsity football, went to a small school, did not get recruited hardly at all. My biggest offer was Mississippi Valley State, Alcorn, which are both SWAC schools. They're both D1 FCS, but anybody familiar with the different, just levels of the NCAA, the SWAC schools, aren't your glamorous schools. There's a lot of tradition in those schools. The HBCUs, a lot of pride taken in those schools and those athletic programs, but just not to glorify. You might not have an ESPN game. You might have one ESPN game with your biggest, HBCU rival, your SWAC rival in the conference, but you're not playing Alabama. You're not playing Georgia. You're not even playing the UABs and getting CBS games and things and Fox games and things like that. So just my process through high school was a good student. Got my ACT score, so I was good. I was an NCAA qualifier. Graduated #1 in my class, so grades was not an issue. Sign day comes 2014. That first Wednesday in 2014, I signed with Capal Lincoln Community College. Once I signed with Capal Lincoln, I was the first person to sign. That was 2014. That was my graduation class. The last person that signed before me was 2010, and before that in my school, who knows when. My school has had a great number of athletes. Some of the greatest athletes out of Mississippi have come from my community and my school, but they never get to make it to the Division I level, or they go JUCO and don't finish, and for a variety of reasons. But some of the great athletes are in the area I'm from. So like I said, I signed with Capal Lincoln. They were currently ranked #3 JUCO in the nation at that point. My 2014 class was one of the greatest ones, one of the greatest classes to sign at that junior college. And I had the pleasure of playing people like Chad Kelly, in junior college. My freshman year, my first start was actually the second game of the year. We went to East Mississippi. That was my first collegiate start. You playing against Chad Kelly, somebody who broke records at Ole Miss and had a short stint in the NFL. Whose uncle is Jim Kelly, a Hall of Fame quarterback. That team was loaded with different kids from, D1 bounce backs to also some of the top players in Mississippi that didn't qualify. some of the top 10 players in the state. You know, like Ty Mays, he was a great quarterback for Olive Branch High School. For those that know him, he went to Oklahoma State. Like, they had numbers everywhere. They had at least 8 NFL guys that had a stint in the league from that junior college team and went on to play Division I football as well before they went to the league. So got the pleasure of playing there for 2 seasons. Like I said, I played against Chad Kelly my freshman year. We lost to him in the state championship. And that freshman year really taught me, like, hey, this Mississippi JUCO ball is really competitive, man. It's like the SEC of junior college, and most people will bag you up on that, man. Mississippi Junior College has 14 junior colleges, 7 in the north, 7 in the south. In any Division I school that recruits junior colleges, if you say you got a kid that's playing in Mississippi somewhere, they know they're the real deal. You only get 8 out of state, if I'm not mistaken, for each roster, so it's like a 50 to 53 man roster. So you can see the teams are made up of Mississippi kids, besides a few. So, like I said, I played there 2 years, and I had to go through the recruiting process again. Went through some injuries my sophomore year. I had offers from like South Alabama, Southern Miss, UAB, Middle Tennessee. Had a lot of interest from, Alabama, Vanderbilt, Kentucky. I was actually getting recruited by Alabama with Kirby Smart before he left. So I had the pleasure of meeting some great coaches, meeting some great players, being coached by some of the greatest coaches. And like I said, just battled some injuries and things like that. And what led me to UAB, was really just injuries and the recruiting process. I saw how fast that, offers can be taken away, how injuries play a part into it, numbers games. And like I said, like we're going to talk about today, just the difference between, that was 2015, 16, compared to 5 years, fast forward to 2021, what these kids are experiencing today. So,
well, I'm going to run it back a little bit. He said something very powerful in there, Mississippi. So I played with a bunch of Mississippi guys, and for some odd reason, those guys, you guys, have a complete different edge. It's a complete different style of football, and those guys play with a different hunger that I can't explain. I'm from South Florida, so I know we play football year-round. It's never cold. Came up here to Alabama, see how the Alabama guys play, see how the Georgia guys play. But when I first started playing with Mississippi guys, it was just something different. Break down to me just the Mississippi mindset, because I can't put my hand on it.
Right. And you have to be from Mississippi to know, and that's crazy, man. Like I said, I did an interview just 2 weeks ago, and that was the main point of the interview, one of the main points. He said the same thing, like, man, you said Mississippi, so tell me about that. I played Mississippi JUCO ball, came to Alabama, that's where I played my 3 years at UAB. I had an array of teammates from California, Canada, overseas, Florida, Georgia, Tennessee, you name it. I will give respect. Alabama has some great athletes. Everybody knows South Florida and Texas breed great athletes. California breeds great athletes. But the difference between those states, and we all know that those states are all larger than Mississippi, so take that into consideration. Mississippi just breeds dogs. Yeah. I'm going to tell you why, because like I told you, I went to a school with, 250 people at the most. Even if I went to the biggest school, that same dog, that same chip on their shoulder will still be with, if I went to a 6A school in Mississippi. If I lived in Jackson, which is the capital, like if I lived in the biggest city in Mississippi, I would still have that same dog, because nothing's ever given. Right. Everything is always earned, and it's a dog mentality, man. Like, you look at the Chiefs that just played the Super Bowl, they had 7 guys from Mississippi on their roster, and I had the pleasure of, going on some official visits with a couple of those guys, and a couple of those guys I looked up to while I was in high school. We have a thing called a Danny Dozen, which is like basically the top 12 guys in the state, and that's something that, as a high school player in Mississippi, that was you strive to be your senior year. That summer going into that fall, you looking at the countdown list. They do a whole week countdown. You like, I want to see my name on that Danny Dozen list. And if you a part of that prestigious club or company, you're considered one of the greatest ones in the state. So it's little small things like that people from Mississippi look forward to. And like I said, it's just a dog mentality, man. Nothing's ever given, everything's earned, and we just feel like we had to go take something.
Right.
Simple as that. Like I said, I play with a lot of South Florida boys. I can see a lot of Mississippi in them, or vice versa. They might see a lot of South Florida in us. They just really getting it out the mud, as people say. Having nothing, let's go make something out of nothing. And I think that's the difference you see with Mississippi people. Mississippi supports Mississippi.
Right.
That's something that I can say. I can't speak for other states, but Mississippi supports Mississippi. Whether I went to a camp with you, whether we signed to the same school, whether we play together, whether we just looking at stats and saying, "Oh, you number one in the state in this, I'm number 5." Whoever wins, if one person wins, we feel like everybody wins.
Right.
I think that's a neutral, feeling and understanding between Mississippi athletes, regardless of the sport. I feel like that's just a mentality that we just carry along. We want to see everybody succeed because not many of us, succeed, man. Like I said, I was speaking of my high school.
Right.
You go look at some of the greatest basketball players, football players. They either went to HBCU, colleges in Mississippi, and most of those were from Mississippi, or some of the greatest high school players. Man, you can just go back in the 90s, 80s, some of the highly ranked, players before there was an ESPN 300 or 247. Some of those guys didn't have the exposure, wasn't going to Nike combines and Nike camps and McDonald's games and Jordan Brand classics and things like that. Those people were top 25 players in the state coming from small towns in Mississippi with no exposure. You don't hear about them because, like I said, for a variety of reasons, they either, turned off on the wrong path, something came up. It's easy to get distracted.
Gotcha.
It's so much. You see so many people not succeed, so easily to get distracted and off your path, and it takes a very, very special breed of person to, finish the journey, and put on for the silver, as people say, man. So I would say that's the biggest difference between another state compared to Mississippi when it comes to athletics and their mindset that they take into it.
So I had to highlight this for you Mississippi guys, but hey, those are some hard-working football players. So I want to pivot to this. There's a pandemic inside of the pandemic for collegiate athletes, especially high school students, the class of 21. We have kids who are receiving offers, but when you have a collegiate player that is already transferring to the school that high school student athlete is receiving an offer to, majority of the time, coaches want that player that already is experienced. So we have a lot of guys who are sitting out and waiting for the big offer, but at the same time, they're losing money for school and they're losing the opportunity to play. Now, this is not all cases, but like I said, this is why we're here highlighting this issue. What I want to ask you, how was it just waiting for the big offer, but when it came down to it, you had to pick the JUCO route? In your mind, like, where did that put you? How do you make that decision? What was the key factors in saying, you know what, I did not get the big offer that I'm seeing all these other guys getting?
Right.
And I'm just going to go ahead and just play. Can you walk me through the emotions of going through that process?
Right, man. I would say this, just starting off, there is no book of instructions to say, hey, step 1, I do this. Step 2, I do this. Step 3, every situation is different. As I said before, my grades were good. 3.8, made the ACT that I needed. I'm an NCAA qualifier. Naturally, even in today's time, that puts you ahead of the curve. While most athletes don't go or get that big offer, you can have this kid that's getting all this interest and things like that. And the number one thing that holds them back, and it's been like this for forever, are grades. ACT score or core GPA. Luckily, on my end, I was blessed enough that wasn't the case. So you look at this kid, not to brag, but my stats. I was realistic with myself. Like I had to be honest with myself. I said, okay, where do I compare? Because I've never been the type to boast. I look at it, 100-some tackles, and I know I play on a smaller level, so I put that into consideration. I know I had to do more and above just because I was playing on a lower level. Junior year, 114, 15 tackles.
Wow.
Cool. I had like 7, 8 sacks. Okay, that's pretty